Morning, everybody, and welcome to this session. This is about the India stack, and I'm very pleased to welcome Mr. Sharad Sharma. As we all know, he's the co-founder of iSpirt actually, foundation, which is basically engaged in creating what we call digital public goods. That's a very important concept. It's great for this country. Most importantly, and very recently, it has actually launched or created a set of open protocols to enable easy lending for the multitudes of India. It's an open set of standards, basically, which allows us to basically reach out to the masses with credit, enabling a huge amount of growth out in areas where were underserved earlier. So that's a very, very important point. But we should kick off straight away with the India stack. When we speak of India stack, we think of basically digital technologies enabling a whole lot, which wasn't done earlier, a sort of stack with Aadhaar as its foundation, with various other things which have come on top of it, not exactly on top, but which kind of work with it, like UPI, the Unified Payments Interface. We have DigiLocker, basic level things, and more sophisticated things. This is evolving very rapidly. India is basically on a curve almost ahead of the world, or basically leading the world in many ways in this area. So let's kick this off straight away and hand the mic over to Sharad, who will explain to us where we are at this point with the India stack. So where are we at this juncture? We've made a great start. So let's hear from you, Sharad. Here we are.
Thank you, Arish. It's a privilege to be talking to you, and we've been interacting earlier, but this is the first time I think we've met, so very happy to be here. And I'll ask a question. How many of you know about India Stack? Show of hands. So that'll give us a sense of, so a handful of you know about India Stack. So India Stack is a set of building blocks, and Lego pieces that you can put together to make things happen, right? And we'll talk about that as we go along. One of the impacts of this is that it is now possible to set up a de novo digital program. I'll give you an example. Is there anybody in the room who is not vaccinated? Everybody is vaccinated, right? So India has managed to do something remarkable in vaccination. So we had, normally we have roughly about 25 million children that are born. Our vaccination program was to vaccinate those children, right? And we try and do as good a job as possible. And depending on the season, there are about 31 to 40,000 vaccination centers. So those vaccination centers would ordinarily vaccinate 25 million children a year. And as you know, our vaccination program would routinely do 25 million vaccinations a week. And there were days when it would do 25 million vaccinations, right? But we didn't add hundreds or even thousands of new vaccination centers. What we did was we eked out more productivity from the existing vaccination centers that were there. And there were two things that this has demonstrated to us. One, by having a purely digital approach, which is what we had for vaccination, does it result in exclusion? So one of the fears in India has been that if you have a fully digital program, exclusion will be an outcome, and that has not turned out to be the case for vaccination. The second, the benefit of taking this approach is that you can now reimagine the flow of people, the flow of information, and the flow of money in the system. And when you can reimagine that, then productivity outcomes are very high, which is what happened in the COVID vaccination. So you remember, how was your flow of people handled? Aadhaar. How was flow of information handled? You all got a COVID certificate right away, right? And where did you get it? You got it in DigiLocker. You got it in your COWIN app. There was no, time interval in knowing, when you will get your certificate. And most of the vaccination centers, they were paid overnight so that when they opened again, they were ready for the next day. In fact, as far as I know, unless you know better, I don't know of a single kind of a news report that has come where somebody has been complaining that they didn't get paid. So this is the larger narrative for India. The larger narrative for India is that if we reimagine the flow of these three things, can we unlock, can we take care of leakage, and can we unlock productivity almost in any area of the economy that we are talking about? And the answer to that is yes. And to make this possible, you need these building blocks that we are talking about. These building blocks collectively are called India Stack. So, which are those building blocks? For identity, it is like Aadhaar, or in health, for example, some of you should take an Aadhaar ID. If you take it early, like Google email, you'll get a nice ID. So, I'll ask you to take that. One other ID, for example, so this is an example of that. Money. Is there anybody here who doesn't use UPI? Right? So today, for example, we will do more UPI transactions in India than China, South Korea, France, and US put together. Can you imagine that? So when you said we are advanced, we are truly advanced, right? And then flow of information is very important. DigiLocker is a very important way for us to do that. But there are new generation systems that have become possible. Some of you may have read the news report, which I think came yesterday, about the account aggregator, which is a financial data sharing system that is there, which puts you in control of your financial data, is now connected to 1.1 billion bank accounts, right? So this is a launch that has quietly happened in India, which is almost 3 times the size of GDPR when it happened some years ago. And it is far more sophisticated, far more impactful as we go forward. So this is really what's happening in a sense with India Stack.
Sharad, I have to ask you this because it's just been in the news. How important is data protection in all of this? As you know, we've just withdrawn the data protection bill, and we also talk about DAPA, for data empowerment and protection, an important aspect of all this. So how does that affect all of this? Is it a holdback in any way, etc.?
Yeah, no, I think they're saying that they'll bring a new bill. In the old bill, which went through a long process, there were many parts. There were things to do with social media. There were things to do with cross-border data flows. There were things to do with data sharing in India. The data sharing in India part is not controversial, but the other two parts are very controversial. I am hoping, I have no special knowledge, that they will unbundle this and do them differently instead of one large omnibus bill. But I want to spend a little time explaining to people what is happening for your data in India, this in-country data management. All of you have a bank account. So these banks have been in operation, not in India, but in the world, especially in Italy, because that's where it started, for 400 years. In the first 250 years of that 400 years, let us say, Arish, you were my banker, and let's pick him. May I know your name? Huh? Jared. So Jared, I owed money to Jared. But Jared was really good friends with you. So he came to you and said, Sharad owes me money. Give me some Sharad's money. You would happily give him that money. There was nothing I could do to prevent you from doing that. So only in the last 150 years, there is this golden rule of banking came. The golden rule of banking is that if you are my custodian, you are my banker, custodian of my money, thou shall not debit my account or send my money to somebody else without my permission. This has only been for the last 150 years. So what does it mean? The bank then gives you a checkbook on which you give permission. Or they say you go to the SBI, HDFC site and give permission, or you go to the app and give permission. What UPI does, it says, why does it matter whether Sharad gives permission to the bank or it gives to PhonePe or Google Pay or Bharat Pay or Beam app? As long as the permission is digital, it is non-repudiable and electronically signed, it's good enough for you. You're not violating that law. So by unbundling the role of the permission collector from the custodian, you are able to create a new payment system which is very, very efficient and it's scaled very rapidly. Now, we in 2016 as a country decided that this is the shift that will happen for personal data. Today, if my personal data is sitting with a custodian, because Airtel knows which cell towers I went to come here, Google knows a lot of my data, many people know about my personal data, there is no obligation for them to not share my data with somebody else without my permission. So we are in that first 250 years of that money system that existed for data right now. India is the first country which decided that we will pivot to a new regime where if your personal data is sitting with a custodian, it cannot be sent to somebody else without consent. That consent system was first, the regulators came together to implement it for financial data, because financial data is so important and sensitive. And that system is called the account aggregator system. That's up and running, and that is now connected to 1.1 billion bank accounts. There is nobody's bank account here where you cannot now use a system where you give consent to a consent manager, who's not your banker, by the way, whose role is to only look after your consents and say, hey, don't over consent. This is electronic consent. You can revoke your consent if you like. You can audit your consent if you like. You can be notified when your data was sent to somebody else. That system has been built in India. The same system now is also been applied in health, and that is called personal health records. NHA is implementing it. Some of you should try that out. And what the bill did was that in other sectors where you don't have these vertical regulators, it would make it a requirement there as well. So I don't think much is lost. Meanwhile, these two systems, health and finance, don't need the bill. They are rolling out rapidly. And as they gain momentum, you will see, and if the system works, which we have to see, and I'm quite hopeful that it will, you will have consensus saying we must apply this to all sectors. That is the purpose of the bill for us, and I'm hoping that it will come. But even if it takes a year or two extra, it's not the end of the world for us right now, because the regulators in two sectors are bringing this to life at a scale that has not been seen anywhere else in the world. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you. So you're essentially saying that the financial sector has already taken care of the problem,
and
in health as well. So between public goods that we have of the kind, UPI can be considered a public good, right? And this kind of system where consent is necessary through the AA system of account aggregators, how do we reach out to people? Does this help inclusion? Does it give us a fillip in basically taking finance and credit out to those who were underserved all this while by the traditional system?
Absolutely.
It's enablement.
It's a very good question.
Speak about that.
So, so first is that if you have all these building blocks for flow of people, flow of money, flow of information, then you can apply this to any facet of the economy, right? You can apply it to the social sector, you can apply it to the commercial sector. Companies can do it for their own businesses because it unlocks productivity. So it's a win anyway. But the second question that we have to ask is, what more can we do? And that's the question you are asking. Can we reimagine something? Now, what happens is the small businesses in India, when they go for a loan, they're asked for collateral. They don't have collateral. Or whatever collateral they have, they've already put it, you know, we are in Delhi, so I can use the Hindi word. They've already girvi kiya hua hai. They have nothing else to give, right? And so what do they do? So the question then is that, can we use their information as collateral? Remember, India, because of all these changes, is becoming data rich. The first country in the world to become data rich before it is economically rich. So now the question is, can I use this collateral to get a loan, information collateral to get a loan? So I'll give you an example of how that works, and we won't get into lots of detail, but a very simple example. Look, I am 58 years old. I go to Jared. Now we'll turn him into not somebody I owe money to, but a medical insurer. So he's a medical insurer. I go to him and say, hey, Jared, will you give me a medical insurance for a year? He says, 58, sir, aapko wo medical test karana padega. So I go and get a medical test. Then he comes to me and he quotes a rate for 1 year. Let's assume for a moment, it doesn't matter what it is 5,000 rupees. So I go to him and say, look, I will give you 50,000 rupees. You give me a 10-year policy. Will he give me a 10-year policy? No. Because he says, you're 10 years, something will go wrong, Sharad. And you know, even if it doesn't go wrong, if you stay healthy, you know, I'll give you a 6,000, 7,000 rupee later. If you stay unhealthy, your rate will go up a lot higher, right? So it is therefore very risky for him to give me a 10-year policy, because, you know, it's almost sure that there'll be a claim, very high possibility. On the other hand, if I come to him and say, hey, Jared, I got to make a quick trip to Singapore. It's a 2-day trip. Will you give me insurance for 2 days? He'll say, "Aap le lo, aapko medical test bhi nahi chahiye." Because his thing is, 2 din mein kya hoga, yaar? Are you with me so far? So when you take a small business and you have to give them a 3-year loan, it's very difficult. You don't know they'll be around 3 years later. But if you have to give them a 3-month loan, then you can make sure they'll be around 3 months later. You know how? You go to GST and see how many outstanding invoices they have. And then, so you look at the first invoice. Let's say they have 10 invoices outstanding. So you look at the first invoice and you say, this invoice is the 6th invoice to this buyer. Let me now go to his data that he has given to me on consent, right? We're talking about this, and go and see his bank account. Oh, all the previous 5th invoices were paid in full and more or less on time. So I can now assume the 6th invoice will also be paid on time. But this other invoice is the first invoice to a buyer. We don't know how this will perform. So he can say this small business has 8 of the 10 invoices which are high quality. This other business has 5 of the 10 invoices that are high quality. This third business has 2 of the 10 invoices that are high quality. And without needing any rating agency, no other party involved, they can now make a reasonable assessment as to whether they'll be around 3 months later, and how much loan should they give him and what interest rate they should give. This system is not completely unique to us. By the way, it actually exists in a fairly decent form in Mexico. It is called NAFIN. We've just been inspired by that, and our hope is in the coming 2-3 years, you will see it happen at scale that no other country has seen before. And that is an example of bringing information collateral based lending to life, which can only be possible because you have allowed the borrower to share their information with people whenever they like it and howsoever they like it. And then you can send them small amounts of money and take it back. You can even give them an intraday loan. You can send them 500 rupees in the morning, take it back in the evening. How much does it cost the lender to do that? If you did it on a debit card, how much will it cost? 1% going in, 1% coming out. But if you do it on UPI, how much does it cost? 0. So you can do that as well. And the person cannot run away because he either has a GST number. So if he makes a fraud, then he won't get a loan from somebody else. And if it's a sole proprietor, then you can do it with his Aadhaar number. So because he can't fake his Aadhaar number and run away, right? So you see the pattern coming together. So we are at the cusp of a revolution in information collateral-based lending that the world has not seen before. And why is this important? Is because it generates livelihoods. Everywhere in the world, jobs are created in small businesses. Even in the US, the epitome of large companies, more than 90% of the new jobs come in small businesses. So if you allow our small businesses who have no credit score or anything like that to use their own cash flow as a way to get growth capital, then you will change the face of India as we go forward. You can now also do it in health. May I talk about health?
Please.
So look, our biggest problem in health, you would think, is COVID. It's actually not COVID. COVID is a communicable disease. If you look at death rates across the world, why do the COVID death rates vary? The virus doesn't know he's an American or a French or an Indian, no? So why do they vary? They vary because of comorbidities. Comorbidities are all to do with chronic illnesses. So actually what this is pointing out is we have to manage chronic care in India, whether it's schizophrenia or it is diabetes. And we need a new method of managing it because nobody in the world has a scalable method that will allow us to do it well. So the second big change that is coming, it's called UHI, Unified Health Interface. It used to be called the Open Health Services Network earlier, and it is going to introduce, it's not yet happened, it is going to happen in the years to come, a new way where essentially a doctor, for example, if you have schizophrenia, then the best way to get treated is if there's a psychiatrist talking to you and a therapist talking to you, and the two talk amongst each other, then your chances of doing well are very high. So now this system allows that 3 people to be part of the same in a way that you can optimize it for OPD frequency, not for anything else. So those kind of systems are purely Indian systems and are coming up in India first. We don't know whether they'll succeed. I would like to believe they will, but you will tell me a few years later if you invite me here whether they've succeeded or not, right?
So that's very interesting. The unified health interface.
Yes.
So that's in the works. Is this another public, digital public good?
Yes.
Now, the concept of public goods has long traditionally been seen as something governments provide. This is something which we collectively, it's a governance function. But the private sector has been very deeply involved in providing digital public goods in India, right? So we've overturned, you could say, that paradigm of this being the exclusive preserve of the government. So how do you see this unfolding?
So I'll ask you a question. I'll ask you, is there anybody who went to Wikipedia recently? All right, ma'am, the page that you saw, do you know the name of the people or the person who wrote it for you? No. Do you think that person got paid to write it? So there's no greed involved. There's no glory because you, for heaven's sake, don't even know the name of that person. How many of you use an Android phone? Do you know that is working on something called Linux kernel? This is the richest company in the world, chooses to use Linux kernel that's built by damn volunteers, no greed, no glory volunteers. Can't they put up a team and replace that work? They can't. Because when somebody does it with no greed, no glory, there is something called Shraddha. Right? The best food if you want to have, go to a langar. Shraddha makes it tastiest food. Is that true? So this happens in tech also. So when you say private parties, these are not money-making private parties. These are NGOs who are doing this without greed and glory. Now, of course, this happened in Bangalore. You know why this happened in Bangalore? Because in Bangalore, these MNC R&Ds came. They started coming in early 90s. I set up AT&T Bell Labs in 93 to 97 in Bangalore, and many others came up. Then 15 years later, all these guys working for these multinationals, mostly the US companies, doing cutting edge work, started feeling, ये साले हम इन लोगों को क्यों rich बना रहे? हम अपनी country के लिए क्यों नहीं कर रहे? They were already good musicians, if you allow me to say that. They already knew how to play a violin very well by now. And they said, why are we only playing it in a commercial setting? Why are we not playing it in the subway and the park? And that subway and the park is iSpirt. And that is where people have come together and said, we will build a public tech. And so that government can do things for public tech. This is the counterintuitive idea. So that private innovators can use it for innovation. PhonePe, Kotak Bank, SBI can use it for innovation. But the RBI can use it for regulation. And this is a corny idea. Because when you talk of things in the world, they think innovation and regulation are competing forces. And here you have public tech, which allows the same damn public tech, UPI protocol, allows the regulator to regulate better and allows the innovator to innovate better. So building this kind of public tech is very different than building the private tech. And India has now become the epicenter for building this kind of public tech better than anybody in the world, because India is such an unforgiving country, right? If you don't build it well, will UPI work? Right? So you have to build it well. So, and if you can make it work in India, it will work anywhere else in the world. That any person buys, right? You think it will buy, and even an African will buy. If it works in India, it will work in my country, right? So Srivatsa is here, is smiling. And so will a French guy buy. So French are implementing UPI, you must have noticed recently. वो इंडिया में चलता है तो हमारा भी चलेगा. वो कीनिया वाला भी बोलता है इंडिया में चलता है तो हमारा भी चलेगा, right? So that is the change that is happening.
So that's highly interesting. So basically, the spirit behind this is like the open source movement.
Yes.
We collectively want to do good using technology for everybody,
Yes.
and we will take all the initiatives required to do that.
In the 53 Commonwealth countries, there are a handful of them, 5 of them maybe, which actually are functional democracies. I would like to believe India is a functional democracy. There is Australia, there is Ireland, Canada. There are a handful of them, only 5, 6 of them. The question is, principles of democracy are commonly known, but not yet, and yet everybody can't be a functional democracy. Maybe one reason we are a functional democracy is because our election commission is a constitutional entity, right? And if it wasn't, you will have the mess that you have in the US, right? Where people don't believe in the results that are coming. So these are subtle things that are important in implementation. These principles that we are talking about, which is open protocols, you mentioned that, open networks, we don't have time to go in, and techno-legal regulations are simple principles. They're not even our own. We didn't invent democracy, we just apply it well here. These are not even our principles. But today in the world, we are the best example of using these principles in a large scale in any ecosystem. So that is what India has become. And I thought I'll share it with you so that you can feel a sense of pride in India and be part of this journey and revolution as we go forward. So thank you so much for that.
All right, that's wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Sharad. It's been extremely informative. And I believe we've run out of time. I do hope we stay ahead of the curve on this. We've taken a great start, and I suppose Indian innovation is good enough to keep it going. Yep. Thank you very much.